This is Euronews Tonight, our top stories. Security's beefed up, landmarks are shutting down. France braces itself for a fourth weekend of protests as yellow vest protesters start to gather. Alex has more in the Cube, our social media news desk.
Students on the street. We're in the French capital tonight as students pile the pressure on President Macron.
Passing the baton, a new era in German politics begins as the woman dubbed Mini Merkel wins the CDU's leadership contest. And Jeremy Corbyn hits out at Britain's Brexit deal. The opposition leader tells us he'd push for no backstop on the Irish border. Hello, our top story. Tensions are rising in France as the Yellow Vest movement gears up for a fourth weekend of protests. The government is bracing for the possibility of further looting and violence. The movement continues to gain momentum. Opposition to fuel tax increases has now transformed into general discontent with high living costs across France. With almost 90,000 police currently on standby, Emmanuel Macron's government isn't taking any chances. Euronews' Robert Hackwell reports.
In Paris, it's the calm before the feared storm of renewed yellow vest protests on Saturday, and the city's on high alert. Instead of focusing on Christmas custom, shops and streets are preparing for violence and destruction, fortifying windows and removing urban furniture. Last Saturday's damage has been cleaned up, but the city forecasts new violence and riots. A dozen museums will be closed, as will the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe. Today, normally, we have window screens that should arrive, which must be installed today. But unfortunately, as we still had a prefectural decree to remove the terraces, there really should be palisades to close the whole establishment. So we tried to find a solution. We're not going to install them today, we're going to shift the installations. Others made a different choice. This owner of a small cinema will close its doors. I don't see the point of being open here. The clients aren't going to come, they're scared. I do re-releases from the 40s and 50s. These are elderly patrons coming to my theatre. What do you want me to do? Risk the safety of the elderly? The elderly won't even come, they don't want to come. Hundreds of arrests have been made in Paris and dozens have been injured. The fear is of escalation. Tomorrow, nearly 90,000 security forces will be sent into the streets around the country. The Interior Minister worries about violent people ready to fight. Calls for murders have even been made on social media networks. One person expressed on social networks his intention to destroy French monuments and, by extension, the Republic. And this person mentioned the demonstration planned on December the 8th. On his Facebook page, this person posted a message saying that a good cop was a dead cop. Interior Minister Christophe Castanet describes the Yellow Jackets movement as a monster that's escaped from its parents. Robert Hackwell, Euronews.
And protesters are also planning to take to the streets well beyond the French capital. In smaller cities and throughout the countryside, many are already preparing for the days, even weeks of protests to come. Euronews' Annalise Borges sent us this report from a Yellow Vest gathering in Rennes in the northwest of France.
Throughout the week, we've seen scenes like this one repeat again and again. Yellow vests gathering near a roundabout and asking drivers that pass by to honk to show their support. And it works. They've been honking pretty much throughout the day and throughout the last few days. And for these protesters, it signals that they have the support of a large number of people here in France. This is a movement that started in cities like Rennes, in suburban areas, in peripheral areas outside of big metropolis, from people that need their cars to get to work, to get to their friends and family. This is a movement that started in protest against fuel tax increases, but has widened to include other grievances and to take other shapes. This particular group here in Rennes is very symbolic of what's been happening to the movement. They've been erecting this more solid infrastructure. It's a very basic one, of course, but they say this is going to protect them against the elements, against the wind and the rain, because they believe they might need to stay over Christmas and New Year's. They say they now have the upper hand. They believe the concessions made by the administration of Emmanuel Macron signals that they have a little space now to perhaps make this movement even bigger, take this movement even further. They've been talking about how decisive this weekend is going to be, but many here won't be going to Paris. They say they are against the violence that is taking place there. And those who are going to go to Paris have been calling on other demonstrators to not join in the violence. Take a listen.
On assiste à des groupes organisés.
We're seeing organised groups, anarchists and far-right groups that are organised, real secret armies. They move fast, they gather in groups of 3 or 4 to infiltrate demonstrations. Once in, they regroup and trigger a riot, and then they leave. Today, police are not armed to fight against these groups. They would have to be much more agile. So I would like to call on the Yellow Vests not to follow these groups. When we see them come, we should distance ourselves. We leave them, we isolate them.
Quand on les voit arriver, on s'en écarte, on les laisse, on les isole.
Authorities are bracing for yet another weekend of mass demonstrations. Some 90,000 security personnel are expected to be deployed in the streets of France. Paris, which is going to be the focus of those demonstrations, is set to be in a lockdown. Authorities have been asking shops to remain closed. Annelise Borges in Rennes, Western France, for Euronews.
Well, many French school students have also taken to the streets. They're angry at planned reforms to the exam system, which they believe will increase inequality. Footage of a group of pupils being forced to kneel with their hands behind their heads has sparked outrage on social media. Well, let's get the details now with Alex over at our social media news desk, The Cube. And Alex, there's been a big response to this.
Certainly, Sam. This video, which went around on social media, is from Mantes-la-Jolie. It's to the west of Paris. It shows roughly 150 high school students. They're kneeling with their rucksacks on their hands behind their head as officers in riot uniforms are seen standing over them. Now, it's worth saying the Gilets jaunes, this big yellow vest movement, has inspired others, including the students, to pile on the pressure on Emmanuel Macron over the issues they are unsatisfied about. But when this video went around, people saw this as shocking. They thought it was a disturbing video, and indeed, first of all, a lot of fact-checkers in France made sure this was indeed a real video. They compared the angles, and indeed, AFP's team of fact-checkers did say that was a real video. Let's just bring you up some of the reactions to that. Well, an education union saying, how can the Republic progress if it puts the young people on their knees? And despite that video going around yesterday, young people back out today. Worth saying local authorities say those young people were engaged in a violent demonstration, but of course it is a controversial image nonetheless. Well, let's just bring you up the scenes from the streets of Paris today, captured by Emmanuel from our team in The Cube. It shows a demonstration where at least one rubbish bin was set on fire. The students, as you can see here, out gathering on the streets. This, of course, ahead of the official Gilets jaunes Gilets jaunes protests this weekend. Well, come with me. Let's speak to Emmanuel now. She is in Paris tonight, the French capital, and spent the day with French students. Hello to Emmanuel. Emmanuel from our Cube team. First of all, this has been a big deal on social. How did you end up at that protest today?
Well, we've been following this protest for 3 weeks now in The Cube, both you and I, watching these unfold on social, on Snapchat. They're largely organized on Facebook. And we got in touch with them and got in touch with the student president of one of the unions and jumped on a train and came and met them this morning. And I was out there all day with them, hundreds of students walking through the streets of Paris.
Yeah, I just thinking, Emmanuel, when you were there with the students there today, what were their key demands? And did they have any reaction to that video we saw going viral?
Yeah, it was very clear on the ground that that video had an immediate impact. All the students were talking about it. They were reenacting the scenes that you just showed, and kneeling on the ground with their hands behind their heads. They were chanting, Macron démissionne, which means Macron resign. So they were angry, they were frustrated, and but they were not violent. We didn't see any violence today in the protests, except one garbage bin that was set on fire.
We heard there from Emmanuel. Demands for President Emmanuel Macron to resign. And indeed, the pressure will be piled on Macron this weekend as the wider Yellow Vest protests are set to continue, Sam. OK, Alex in The Cube and Emmanuel in Paris, thank you both.
Now, after 18 years at the helm and a series of recent setbacks, Angela Merkel has stepped down as leader of Germany's Christian Democrats. But her legacy lives on. She's been replaced by her protege Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, often known as Mini Merkel or AKK. Kramp-Karrenbauer was the continuity candidate favoured by the party elite. She failed to win a majority during the first ballot, but held a lead over her rival Friedrich Merz. Health Minister Jens Spahn dropped out for the runoff vote, and AKK sealed the deal with 517 of the 999 votes cast. Well, Euronews' Jessica Saltz has been following the vote at the party conference in Hamburg, and she joins me now live from there. Hello to you, Jessica. So the baton has been passed on from Angela Merkel, but how much of a surprise was it that this vote went to a second round before she won through?
Well, I think this entire voting process that we saw here today was new to most of us, because it is the first time in 47 years that there's been more than one candidate to choose from when it comes to voting the new leader of the Conservative Party. And of course, we've seen a huge furore in the media over the last few weeks surrounding the three top candidates who were named. And of course, today, as we saw, it came down to the wire. It was very, very close between Friedrich Merz, the more conservative candidate, and Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who represents certainly the more sort of centrist values of the party and the continuation of Angela Merkel's politics in many ways. I don't think it's such a surprise that it was so closely split between them. Both Merz and Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer had a lot of support within the CDU party base and also within delegates that voted today. And I think we're seeing here a party that is quite divided on lots of issues, including who to vote for as for CDU party head. And I think that's going to be the challenge for Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer and also Angela Merkel as they continue to govern together. They're governing together over a party that is split on many issues.
And Jessica, briefly, AKK, as she's nicknamed, is a household name in Germany, dubbed the continuity candidate for her alliances with other parties. But for those who aren't so familiar with her, give us a bit of a sense of her style of leadership and her policies.
Well, I think we saw quite a lot of what AKK is like during this very passionate speech that she gave, in which she highlighted that she's really passionate about domestic issues and social issues in Germany. She really wants Germany to be a country in which people live well. She's in for fair pension reforms and also for school reforms and these kinds of issues. And in that way, she's seen as being more left-leaning on the political spectrum. But then on the other side, she's very conservative on some social issues, and this is where we see her kind of balanced in the middle as a centrist candidate. On social issues such as abortion, she's very much against, she says, because of her religious background, and she's also known to be quite staunchly against gay marriage. Now, this was something that was downplayed in her election campaign ahead of today's vote, but I think this is something that could really be pushed, an issue that could really be pushed if Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer ever does, for example, decide to run for Chancellor. A Chancellor candidate who is very staunchly against gay marriage is not something that's going to go down very well. So she did come out of today's election a victor, and she will be working very closely with Angela Merkel. And we saw a very happy German Chancellor there. I expect that these women will govern very closely and very well together.
Okay, Jessica Saltz there in Hamburg. Thank you. Still to come here on Euronews Tonight, the revolving door at the White House continues to spin as Donald Trump reveals his pick for the next US Attorney General. We'll have more on that after the break. To Brexit now, and the leader of Britain's opposition party has spoken to Euronews today. Jeremy Corbyn told our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, that if he were in power, there would be no Irish backstop. Well, Darren joins us now live from Lisbon, where Mr. Corbyn has been attending the Party of European Socialists Congress. Hello to you, Darren. So for months, these negotiators have been wrestling with this issue of the Irish border backstop. But Jeremy Corbyn told you there's no need for it. How would that work?
Yeah, it's really interesting, of course. We keep coming back in these Brexit negotiations, don't we, Sam, to this idea of the Irish border and the backstop, much hated, of course, by Brexiteers. It is the reason, potentially, that Theresa May well lose that vote in Parliament on Tuesday. A lot of